All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. Now, with the start of the 2021 college football season right around the corner, one question that needs to be answered, and that is, will the dominance of the Oklahoma Sooners continue in the Big 12 conference? You look at Oklahoma, they have won the last six Big 12 titles, and they are looking for lucky number seven here in 2021. It's been a smooth transition for Oklahoma from Bob Stoops to Lincoln Riley, as Lincoln Riley consistently has Oklahoma atop the Big 12 and consistently contending for a spot in the college football playoff. And when you think about Oklahoma, you think about their offense. And now the keys to this Sooners offense go to sophomore quarterback Spencer Rattler. And we saw Rattler get in there and get some quality reps, make some big time plays for Oklahoma last year as a freshman. And now he's going to go to look to build off of that and put this team in contention for a spot in the college football playoff. You look at sophomore wide receiver Marvin Mims. He could have a big time impact for the Sooners offense here in 2021. A seasoned offensive line, as you're going to have three seniors up front for Oklahoma. Then you look at this defense. At times Oklahoma's defense can look bad, but you think about the offenses in the Big 12. However, Oklahoma's defense is equipped with enough athletes to make the big plays out there for the Sooners. You think about hybrid pass rusher Nick Bonito, senior defensive end Isaiah Thomas, and these guys are going to put the pressure on a lot of opposing quarterbacks, especially with all of those spread offenses that we see around the Big 12 conference. Now, Oklahoma, they're once again going to be in the mix to win this Big 12. They have a very interesting schedule this year. They go out of conference on September 18th to host the Nebraska Cornhuskers. And you think about what that matchup meant for so many years in the Big 8 conference when Nebraska and Oklahoma always met on the Friday after Thanksgiving. And a lot of times that contest would determine who would win the Big 8. Obviously, things are different now. Nebraska's in the Big 10, while Oklahoma in a couple of years will be joining the SEC. But nonetheless, focusing on this year on October 9th, of course, Oklahoma has their annual meeting in Dallas with the Texas Longhorns, which is followed up by a home contest versus TCU. The big one for me for Oklahoma, I look at November 20th when they host Iowa State. And you look at Iowa State in the last couple of trips that they've made to Norman, Iowa State has, made life tough for the Sooners. And this contest right here really could determine who's going to finish first in the Big 12 conference this year. And then, of course, Oklahoma finishes up at Stillwater at Oklahoma State on November 27th in Bedlam. And, speaking of Iowa State, they've got to find a way to try to live up to the hype this year. They're ranked in the top 10 to begin this season. A lot of people feel that this team can win the Big 12. When you look at it, there's a lot of experience and a lot of quality experience on this team for head coach Matt Campbell. Senior quarterback Brock Purdy has seen his fair share of battles in the Big 12 conference, and he's looking to culminate his stellar collegiate career with a Big 12 championship. You look at junior running back Brees Hall, and I mean, when you think about Matt Campbell's offenses at Iowa State, it's all about getting those quality backs. Before it was David Montgomery, now it's Brees Hall, and he's going to put a lot of stress on opposing defenses around the Big 12. Senior wide receiver Xavier Hutchinson, as well as senior tight end Charlie Collar. These guys right here, they're going to feed off of that powerful running game for Iowa State, and they can do some damage down the field, as this is a potent offense in Ames. Three seniors on this offensive line for Iowa State, which includes left tackle Sean Foster, who is one of the better players at his position in the conference. And I'll tell you right now, you think about this defense for the Cyclones with senior outside linebacker Mike Rose and junior defensive end Will McDonald IV. These guys can bring it. They both have the potential to be all conference performers. And I'll tell you like this is probably Iowa State's best chance in school history to win the Big 12. They have a lot of important games this year. They will host Iowa on September 11th. And you think about what that contest means because, Iowa State always gives Iowa problems. And I think this will be one of those years where Iowa State could potentially get the best of an Iowa team that does have the potential to win the Big Ten. So there's a lot on the line right there. September 25th, Iowa State begins their Big 12 slate of games at Baylor. October 16th, they're at K State. And if you followed K State over the years, that is never an easy place to play for opposing teams coming to the Little Apple. November 6th, Iowa State will host Texas. I talked about the game on November 20th with Oklahoma. And again, Iowa State has given Oklahoma more than its fair share of problems in Norman rather, in recent years. And then Iowa State finishes up at home versus TCU. And TCU is another team that definitely wants to have a say as far as winning this Big 12 conference under head coach Gary Patterson. He's going to rely on junior quarterback Max Duggan. You think about sophomore wide receiver Quentin Johnson, what he brings to the table. But when you think about Gary Patterson at TCU, it's all about his defenses. And you look at middle linebacker D Winters. I also look at junior defensive end O'Shawn Mathis, as this guy can have a big time impact for this Horned Frogs defense here in 2021. It's all about how much noise will TCU be able to make in this Big 12 race. They step out of conference on September 11th to host Cal out of the Pac-12. But then you look at their Big 12 slate. They host Texas on October 2nd. They're at Oklahoma on October 16th, which could be a very big contest. And then they're at Iowa State on November 26th. I look at TCU. This is a team, they have the makings to be a problem for a lot of teams in the Big 12 conference. And when you think about Gary Patterson and you think about his program there, it's all about creating havoc for the opponents. Now, you look at the Texas Longhorns, they're starting over once again under new head coach Steve Sarkisian. Of course, Tom Herman was good, but he was not Texas good, if that makes enough sense. And now the Longhorns are looking to Sarkisian, who is fresh off of a tenure as an offensive coordinator with the Alabama Crimson Tide. Of course, Sarkisian did have a past life as a head coach at the collegiate level with USC, and previous to that at the University of Washington. And he had a lot of success at Washington. But you think about it with Texas and throughout their rich history, and I think it's going to be the case again this year. The Longhorns are going to rely on the running game. When you think about the running backs that Texas has on their roster this year, you think about Bijan Robinson and Roshan Johnson. And there's one thing about Coach Sark, even going back to his days at Washington, he loves to run the football. You think about what he did up there in Seattle with Bishop Sankey once upon a time, and now he has two quality backs at his disposal. I think that's going to be big for him as he looks to get his footing in Austin, and of course the players look to get a feel for what he does. Texas this year, they have an opportunity to do some things. Not a very strong out of conference schedule, so I think the Longhorns can get their 3 wins out of conference right there. But you look at their Big 12 slate, they're at TCU on October 7th, or pardon me, October 2nd. And it's a situation, in recent years, the Longhorns have had their struggles when they go to Fort Worth to take on the Horned Frogs. October 9th, right after what could potentially be a tough game against TCU, of course, they meet Oklahoma in Dallas. And then November 6th, they're at Iowa State. And by a lot of people, they are expecting the Cyclones to be in the mix for that Big 12 title this year. So that's going to be a very tough game for the Longhorns, potentially. You look at Oklahoma State, and you have to ask yourself, will the passing ability of quarterback Spencer Sanders be enough to keep the Cowboys in the mix for the Big 12 title? You think about Oklahoma State's offenses under Mike Gundy, and you know what? They're always wide open. They're flying the football up and down the field, but it's always a matter of, will the Cowboys have enough defense? Oklahoma State is definitely going to score some points again. They have a very interesting schedule as well. They step out of conference on the 18th of September to take on Boise, and they're actually traveling to Boise. Of course, Boise State for the longest time, they've been the kings of the Mountain West Conference. October 16th, the Cowboys will travel to Austin to take on Texas. And then October 23rd, Oklahoma State will travel to Ames to take on Iowa State. And Iowa State, especially with that D, could potentially cause some problems for this Oklahoma State offense. And then, of course, the Cowboys finish up at home versus the Sooners in Bedlam. And I think this contest this year could have a different spin on it now that Oklahoma is looking to leave the Big 12 in favor of the SEC. And of course, for a lot of people around the Sooners program, they might look at Oklahoma State as a little brother, and this could be an opportunity for Oklahoma State to go out there and stick it to their rivals in that state. Now, you look at the true contenders in the Big 12 conference this year. I think it comes down to Oklahoma, Iowa State, and TCU. Who's going to be the two teams that get to AT&T Stadium for the Big 12 championship game? And at the end of the day, I think it's going to be Oklahoma and Iowa State. I think these two teams will split the two games this season. I think that Iowa State will get the best of Oklahoma during the regular season, but I think that the Sooners do return the favor to Iowa State in the Big 12 championship game. It is so difficult, and I cannot say this enough, to defeat a team twice in a season. And you look at Oklahoma, they typically have that one hiccup during the regular season in recent years. And if Oklahoma were to lose to Iowa State this year, it would be far from a hiccup due to the fact that Iowa State is a legit team. But nonetheless, I think Oklahoma comes into this conference season here in 2021 once again as the team to beat in the Big 12 conference. The Big 12 championship, as always, is Oklahoma's to lose. And you know what? You're not going to say it's cockiness, but there is an air of swagger around this Oklahoma program, and rightfully so, because when you go there to play for the Sooners in this era, it's not just about winning the conference. It's also about having an opportunity for a national championship. And going back to generations past, it was like that for Oklahoma for so many years when they were in the Big 8 conference. And you think about some of the great coaches that they've had that have passed that tradition on to now Lincoln Riley. So I look at it like this: Oklahoma, they're once again in the mix to win this conference. Iowa State will be a very game team, as will TCU. Texas will be an interesting story as they're looking to get their footing under Steve Sarkisian. Oklahoma State, they're always a good team, but I'm just not sure if the Cowboys can push for that Big 12 title this year. K-State, you can never overlook K-State. It's going to be interesting to see how teams that are like kind of up and down trying to get, their feelings, so to speak, such as Texas Tech and West Virginia will play out this year. And then, of course, you have Baylor and Kansas. But I think it's Boomer Sooner, once again, who will reign supreme on the gridiron in the Big 12. So, folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take the time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you have not already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it will be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. You can check it out, drop a line, and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin, signing off, saying take care and have yourselves a wonderful day.